Can you spit up phlegm on a network anchor?
Only if you're speaking German.
I thought you were going to do something worse, like how would they ever know? Tonight's items and what you'll hear, while it may sound like that they're about other things, most of them are actually about man's mind and consciousness again. Well, hell, all of them are. The more conscious know a secret, but they don't know what it is. Oh, they know all right, but they know that if they told you, that you wouldn't know. The more awakened know a secret, but they don't know what it is. Oh, they know all right, but they know that if they told you that you wouldn't get it. The enlightened know a secret, but they don't know what it is. Oh, they know all right, but they know that if they told you that you'd go, what the hell was that? Everyone knows what they know, nothing more and nothing more. And that is the secret that none, save the few, can face. The unrecognized benefit of active consciousness is that it doesn't know anything. How can you spot the world's greatest magician? He's the one who never gets caught at it. A man asked life, is it possible to be too smart for your own good? And with a snort, life replied, why don't you try it and find out? The control tower told the pilot that although it was foggy and dense, that he would still be able to operate normally, which is what the mind always tells itself. And, sad to say, is true. A man declared, I will only believe in the gods when the news becomes good. And the priest countered, but if the news was good, we wouldn't need the gods. And the man countered, do you honestly believe you can distract me as easily as that? And the priest just grinned. One day a man asked local conditions, say, who do you work for? And LC just wiggled his eyebrows and smiled. One day a man asked himself, what do I believe in and who do I work for? But before he could reply, he lost transmission with himself. One day a man stood up tall and announced, everybody hates a critic, which is why life made half of you be one. And wham, he was out of there. Homeowner's tip, never call a furnace man to clean your attic. How it can actually be beneficial to think other people's thoughts. In some worlds, if you wet your pants, it doesn't count if you're wearing someone else's pants. For you potential transcendentalists in our audience, this is also our horrendously deceptive, destructive, and true-natured lie for the day. Close up your ears, children, or else go out and play somewhere outside this pathetic reality. One man wrote a talk show. Can I be on? And they replied, you already are. Somewhere, hell, anywhere, this side of the actual enlightenment is the moment-to-moment opportunity to either be drifting in man's normal, dull, lethargic, and ponderous state of mental awareness, which is totally adequate to live a routine existence, or to continually shake oneself, enliven the brain, and set perception free to see what it might see. The reality of this constant possibility, right where you are, is what makes the simple want to dream of the mystical as being so far, far away and so hard to find. Okay, to find the more awakened. Okay, those who know what's going on and can face it. Every 7 or 8 years, many people almost go to pieces, only to revive themselves for another 7 or 8, and so on. Your state of consciousness is your sense of time. Your state of consciousness is your sense of space. Your state of consciousness is your sense of life. Your state of consciousness is your sense of you. Pretty impressive, huh? Unless you're a lion or a pig or a moose or something. How to spot the more awakened under conversational conditions. If you tell them that you know what they mean, they'll immediately mean something else. Everyone's mental war story. There I was, surrounded. Snipers on my left, minefields on my right. Mortars left no choice. I had to stay and fight. Everyone's story, if their awareness was sharp enough to tell it. The common attempts to alter consciousness are at best games of chance, and at worst Russian roulette. Only the mystic's way offers specific known possibilities. One man never cared if it rained unless drops threatened his own headstone. Simple minds can always come up with a specific local example to deny the reality of the universal. Homeowner's tip: never call a roofer to clean your attic. After reaching Istanbul, one man began pursuing a book, only to stop and think, how do people read this crap? Everyone, including science, knows what the brain runs on, but none but the awakened consciousness. Said a man, my feet tingle. Replied, and well they should. And tells the legend of the silent stranger who rode into town wearing the lead-lined socks. And then goes the myth of the ghostly pilot who buzzed their ranches sporting the filter cap. While off camping, the mystic, as protection, always carries along his wake me when it's over kit. And to be doubly safe, also takes along an it's over. Retail shopper's money-saving tip. After surveying religion, sports, entertainment, and politics, one man said, why don't all of you just directly suck up to the big dog's ass and cut out the middleman's markup? And life told one guy, watch it, bub. Within the world of debate can all of the unknown conceal itself. Within the mind of man can all dark corners hide. Right out in the open. When you hear the sound of impotent gunfire, ask not for whom the carousel turns, for it is I, sweet Eckhart, come to displace that uncertainty in thy journey through the wood. Help! My God, I've been shot. Where? Right here. Right out in the open. Oh my God. Such, given the chance, would be the compassion of fulfilled consciousness for the mind. Homeowner's tip: never call a siding installer to clean your attic. The visibly moving always seems to belie the apparently stationary. How to spot a mystic in a blizzard or anywhere else. If you ask him where he's going, he won't tell you. Only people who know a lot believe they're smart. But in most cases, by then, it's already too late. The difference between the local and the universal, between the symmetrical and the asymmetrical, between the foreground and the background. Oftentimes when the mind thinks something is going on, consciousness doesn't. Once you understand the trip, it's not necessary to physically ride the mystical express out of Paris. All you need to do is think in ways not native to the city of semi-bright lights. One guide used to talk to the gods, but only if they'd let him call collect. The routine mind delined. A frog making waves in a pond, then wondering where they came from. One man said he'd believe in supernatural forces when D comes before C. How to spot a real mystical warrior. He never fires back. Scowling in the mirror, one man warned his reflection, "Don't make me mad. I'm holding a baseball bat and the mortgage to your mother's good looks." Real warriors, real moral. Duck, damn it, duck. Today's fable. Local conditions turned out to be so apparently adverse to one group of creatures that to compensate and help them cope, life gave them the trick of being able to say I and to think of themselves as separate individuals. Well, truth is, I think it also did it as a practical joke. One man had what he called his understanding, which went, anyone who thinks they had the least little thing to do with what they are is a total and complete idiot. He never revealed this to anyone, and asked me not to, but I guess it's too late now. The kind of people who vocally want to be mystics the worst usually make the worst mystics. The reason men like to talk about justice is because they don't like what it is. So it's more fun just to talk about it. The local always seems an exception to the universal. The awakening, the enlightenment, the expanded state of consciousness are all like suddenly setting a stallion completely free from its lifelong confinement in a corral. Of course, most people don't even know it was pinned up to begin with. Homeowner's tip. Never call an interior decorator to clean your attic. Homeowner's final tip. Never call anyone to clean your attic. What are you, nuts? It can't be done. It's not dirty anyway. Well, sure it is, but so what? What are you, nuts? I mean, worrying about it and all, so don't forget, don't call anyone. One guy said, my body's like a fine-tuned machine, and was asked, how about your mind? And he replied, my body's like a fine-tuned machine. How to spot the enlightened. If you ask them where they came from, they'll create a blizzard. One man said, I hate stuff. And someone said, you mean there's stuff you hate? And he replied, no, I hate stuff. Once a man's consciousness has reached its fuller potential, he can look back on his life up until then almost as a metaphor within an allegory. Oh, real enough, but still almost as a metaphor within an allegory. The collective says, why take a chance? And the individual thinks, who am I to think otherwise? Note to you, yeah, you. If you think that this is thinking, well, Buster, you got another think coming. The awakened and the sacred. To let something bother you is blasphemous. The proof. Taken right from the life and mouth of man. If consciousness didn't have a greater potential, we couldn't be standing around talking about it. No need to look, part 122. The real mystic carries around his own monastery, secret school, hidden teaching, and private practice, all in the futuristic privacy of his own head. How to spot the more awakened in paradise. When the buses are called, they don't show up. Being more conscious puts one in control, but in control in an unexpected and nutty kind of way. If I may draw the little diagram again that we were talking, that I was using last time, of there being like the middle ground, both externally and internally, but now we're going to hit it internally. But this is the middle class, the sane sense of collective reality of all ordinary, sane, middle class people. And out at the edges, like a fall off fringe area, if this is the middle of life's progressive parade, then the edges there are the less stabilized, less predictable areas of the parade wherein you might find untoward, dangerous, irrelevant activities taking place. But since we've talked about that several times, and by the way, since we're now taping this and it's getting around at more and more sort of random public showings, it might serve well to periodically point out to people who might be turning on. Though it may sound at times that we're skipping around the edges of it, all of this is about another state of consciousness. There's really no need to pussyfoot, because that's exactly what we're talking about. And there's really no hesitation of saying that the damn thing actually exists. Anyone who has any sort of interest in such matters and any ability to read, not between the lines, but to read the damn lines, you've got at least 3,000 years, give or take 6 months, of publicly acceptable or accepted history, all the way from the Egyptians, the Chinese, the Greeks, and to all the religions, perhaps as far as verbally, publicly known, and to Buddha, and the whole idea of an actual state, and him just describing it, what he worked for, and it suddenly just hit him. And there it was after years of all kinds of strange exercises and following other people's ideas and et cetera, and he just put a name on it and said that then just everything he ever wanted to know, every question he ever had, every question he ever heard that anybody else had, he suddenly understood everything, period. Didn't brag about it, didn't try to sell a course. He just pointed out that I suddenly understood everything. Next, case closed. What do we do now? What time the bar is open? So I'm not trying to, instead of shifting off to a third person about we and us, I'm not trying to hesitate to say what we're talking about, because the state exists, there's nothing strange. All the major religions also speak of it, but they have, all the public major religions, the founders and et cetera, speak of it, but they had a less specific, comprehensible grasp of what had occurred. That's why you find all the ideas of God that turns into all sorts of social occasions, but the heart of all religions, on the basis of personal experience, were from people who had the Enlightenment. That kind of altered state of consciousness was very similar to the Buddha and et cetera, but it happened to people under conditions, et cetera. Anyway, I'm not going to stop and dissect it for you, but it happened to people, in a sense, almost accidentally. They were not as specifically involved with it as a Buddha was, and therefore they ended up, and it's sort of like, when it got over, it's like, what in the hell was that? And what else you going to call it? And once there's an idea of gods, which have been hanging around for years and years, it's real easy. Now, you don't know what the hell to call it, you just know something absolutely extraordinary. Which doesn't begin to cover it to say something extraordinary, because you can go buy a new suit or see a new car and go, that's extraordinary. So there is no real word for it, and so you can use the idea of God, and after that it's just hidden, it's lost, nobody knows what it means. But at any rate, the state is very well known, very well documented, and it does exist. And it's not all that strange, and it's certainly not drug-induced, and it's not induced through chanting, and it's not a gift from the gods, unless you can't understand it better, and then hell, it's a gift from the gods. Happy? But at any rate, that is what we're talking about. But after you say that, if I stand and say, well, that's exactly what it is, and it exists, and everything you ever read is exactly true, and it's just, if that's what you're interested in, there is no word for it other than to say, astounding, extraordinary. But as I said, an ordinary person would go, well, hell, have you ever seen a one-legged man tap dance? That's extraordinary. Yeah, you're right. Have you ever seen a woman, a 52E, and you think, well, yeah, that's extraordinary. So ordinary people can say all kinds of things are extraordinary, and you can say, yeah, but this is really extraordinary. And they go, all right, a 52F. And you think, okay, you got me. But even the point is, after you say that, yes, the state exists, it is absolute, it's as real as anything else, and it's not imagination, it's not anything other than real. Once you say that, what else can you say? And so what we're talking about is everything this side of it. But I just want to point out again, it's not as though I'm speaking in some sort of theory like, I wonder if this actually happens. I wonder if this exists. What do you think? You notice this is not a question and answer, and it's not a debate. It's not even a discussion. What is it? Mind your own business. That's what happens when you let people watch you. They get all pushy. So that's what we're talking about. Now back to the internal state of one's consciousness. And we're talking about somewhere, anywhere, this side of the actual enlightenment, the actual altered state of consciousness to such a degree that everything else looks like imagination. It looks like you had it backwards all these years, which has been noted before. That, wow, I had it, well. If you look at that as being internally the nature of one's mind, one's consciousness right now, that level part is sanity. And as I said, to ever have any possibility of actually, usefully, under some sort of control, but usefully, ever having that kind of experience, ever reaching that state, in a sense, you have got to have a fairly decent sympathetic dose and level ground somewhere in you of being a good boob, being a good middle-class person. You cannot really start out being a weird person and go directly from there to being a mystic, to awakening. You can turn into a weird would-be person and discuss all that you've ever read about it. But at any rate, you have within you that kind of level, sane, middle-class area in your thinking. Some of you may not believe it, but here we go. Of course, if you don't believe it, that's sort of frightening and et cetera. Figuratively speaking. But here you are, with the middle, the sane, the ordinary, and it's the collective notion of what reality is at any given time. Wherever you are, whenever you are, it is that area. That is the stabilizing, that is the center of gravity for your particular locale and your particular time. But now internally, look what you're faced with. On each side, I was calling it the kind of criminal thinking on one side and a kind of insane thinking on the other. And I'd spent the last couple of times trying to point out to you in a broader sense, sort of sociologically, psychologically, politically, how this is just obvious out in life. But now internally, you are faced with the same situation. So let us say that there you stand, you're not absolutely insane, and you still hold on to the interest of this sort of thing. Then where are you going to turn to? Well, it would apparently be that you've got almost one of two choices. Well, of course, you can stay middle class, you can stay a square as much as you are. But then you're left with, generally, one of two possibilities of either becoming, according to which way you take the most shots, or which way you decide to join up with, or which side you think, well, I'll fall off in their direction. I've got to get out of the middle of the road. I cannot go through life being an uptight, middle-class boob and square and etc. But under what would seem to be all reasonable neural conditions, then you've got your choice of either ending up being a sorehead or a flake. Which is, which is the output of what I was describing as falling into the kind of criminal behavior on one side, criminal thinking, not behavior. It's what they would, ordinary people call it, but I'm now trying to get you to see that it's actually the thinking. And the criminal thinking being, as opposed to the middle class sense of reality, that is the area wherein it ranges all the way from a critical attitude to just an absolute attitude of condemnation, and if it goes any further, they would even destroy it. And on the other side, it's more the otherworldly, poetic, mystical, in the ordinary sense of the word, the religious, the spooky, the new age, the sense that the middle of the road, the ordinary sense of reality, is not what it should be, but those sorts of people, that sort of thinking is not involved that much with an attack on it, and especially not with trying to condemn it or to destroy it, but it's more on the basis of, well, this is not what reality should be, but, that's the religious view. Probably being most exemplary, it's sort of like, well, this is not the way life should be, but God will straighten it out later. I'm just not going to concern myself with it. I'll turn my back on it. Or I might, to take the New Testament idea, I might go ahead and render to Caesar that which I must, but I got no faith in it. My eyes, my thoughts are on the higher goal. My heart and soul are with the Lord. You end up, operationally, as I said, sort of having your choice. If you're trying to get off of that, out of the middle ground, if you're trying to do something, and it does not just have to, when I say you, it does not right now have to be limited to anyone who might be properly wired up to hear such as this, because many ordinary people are dissatisfied with ordinary life, and not just in the sense of the behavior of other people, not just in the physical structures of external reality, but internally they feel like, well, I don't like what I hear. I don't like the political ideas I hear. I can't approve of any of them. I don't like, for a while I tried to listen to ideas on the right and then on the left. I tried to consider religion and the one I grew up in, and I studied comparative religion. I'm just not satisfied with what's going on. So ordinary people have some degree of, not all of them, but a sizable number of ordinary people have a certain kind of fairly noticeable to themselves dissatisfaction with the way the mind normally operates. And they will search around. They will entertain other ideas. They'll periodically pick up a book or a magazine or turn on a TV show and try to consider or listen to an idea that's pretty foreign to their sense of what the middle ground is, of what local, proper reality is. If they pursue it much further, they are left, I'm including them with you to start with the serious, potentially would-be mystic. They are left with the fact that if they stray off too far from the middle, and not knowing any more than they do, not being wired up to hear any more than they do, they're going to end up, to give it a nice, short, and not improper name, you're going to end up on one side being an old sorehead. That's O-L-E, because you can be an old sorehead at the age of 19. An old sorehead or a flake. You can just be an old sorehead. I've written plenty of news items about old soreheads, but everybody knows one. You notice I didn't say everybody are one. No sense insulting people. Doesn't do any good. People just take their mirrors and turn it around. See if there's not an advertisement for a funeral home on the back. But you can be an old sorehead in the full sense, and that covers the full range, you understand, of even being what would apparently be a sophisticated, erudite critic of life, maybe some particular aspect. You may end up specializing and attacking the political naivete of man, or the artistic irrelevancy of man, all the way into just being the good old sorehead, just a good old grump, like everybody probably got some old uncle or old cousin or old, they used to call them some old maid. Oh, women never were that bad. I'll let you figure that out. But some old man somewhere, an old widower, an old old unmarried uncle just sits around, maybe smokes a cigar, and if you talk to him, you can hardly get anything out of his mouth other than some kind of complaint. It doesn't have to be reasonable, it doesn't have to be specific, it's just his whole attitude is, life sucks. Mainly because of people, too. Just, so you can be a literate, even a professional critic, social commentator, but a critic of humanity with books, papers behind you, or you can just be an old man sitting in a $99 faux lazy boy, and your criticism of life amount to no more than a periodic spitting up of phlegm against the wall or against the TV set or the radio. That is the old sorehead. The other side is the flake. Soreheads seem to be in the majority, which is not important. They're just noticed more. But the flakes are people. Taken to all sorts of, there's a wide spectrum, taken from those that seem to do it just as recreational sport to those who take it seriously, such matters as pursuing astrology. Of course, religion's the main one, but I was trying to pick out a few more. Or to believe that they engaged in, whatever they call it, rebirth, reliving their lives, or space travel, time travel in their brains, or talking to the dead, or going out and mesmerizing, hypnotizing plants and making them grow faster, or whatever it is. Stuff that people in the middle of the road, just ordinary people, can hear it and go, gee, And to see the person, and they may look fairly regular, or they're on TV, and they say, well, here's our guest for the night, and it's Miss So-and-so, and they say, she has a master's degree in such and such, and they go, and she's here tonight to tell us what it feels like to have periodic sexual relations from people from outer space. And ordinary people look at that and they go, but up to that point, the woman looked all right, she's smiling, they're telling her, she's married, her husband's an accountant, she's from Detroit, Michigan, has 3 children, you're going, yeah, until you hear the point that she's having sexual relations or she's about to bear the child of the prince from the planet Urg or somewhere. Which I know can sound silly and get a joke, but we get a laugh, but all of you grew up around some religion, and you just don't notice it. If we had a person from Urg here, and they heard the natural beliefs of a good Roman Catholic or a Jew or a Muslim, and they heard it, they'd go, what? So, I just wanted you to understand. It is, the point is, you know what flake means. I was just trying to pick it out to give a sort of a balance. You got a sore head or a flake. Now, if you think about it in a particular way, not to prove I'm right, thank you, all you got to do is feel right in your own brain. And may I also refer back, if you think this is a little vague, to my constant references and little news items about the lack of originality and how it's almost impossible to think of anything original. And how people, in fact, never notice it, how, in fact, people seem intent on speaking in cliches, rechewing other people's food, making constant references. That a man who seems to be an expert in something, he will continually pepper his speech with references to my good friend Eckhart, to my bosom buddy Senor Goethe, to my bosom buddy, and they'll refer to even a living person, which makes it easier to try and pull it off, unless the audience is taking a nap, or unless the audience thinks, I could have been friends with Milton. We're talking about the poet, not Burl. Oh. Never mind. Okay. But it was also what I was trying to get you to consider last time, that it will, I submit to you, strike you sometime between here and Istanbul, between the actual final arrival of the great Oriental Mystical Express to that state of awakening, that one day it's going to strike you. I have spent my whole life sitting right here in this one little seat right by the window, staring out at the dismal, dull, lethargic, uninspiring landscape of Yugoslavia, and don't write me. They don't get this in Yugoslavia, forget it. From Yugoslavia, and not only is the scenery, not only that is of the external stimuli that I have experienced seem limited, screw all that, that's not the problem. My brain has been limited. My brain has been on, what's the smallest model rail track? H2O? HO? 2HO? That little teeny stuff. Like made for little midgets and people to play with electric trains. Not only has my ass and body been sitting here on the Oriental Mystical Express, I thought, with nice regular standard track size, wherever it is, 5 or 6 feet, that's not the problem. I seem to sort of be stuck here. I begin to notice that the train seems to kind of bounce, and I keep shuffling around the books here in my compartment, notwithstanding that conductor who warned me. And I kept thinking I'm getting somewhere, but I'm beginning to look out the window and notice more and more, this landscape sure do look familiar. I looked at that house and that tree and that pine there and that partially broken down fence. And I'm going to tell you the truth. It's beginning to strike me. I don't need to check with anybody. That scene, now it may have shifted just like that much. But it's taken like 10 years. And I'm still looking at more or less that same scene. That was bad enough. Stuck here on that. What is the track of a railroad? Who cares? 5 or 6 feet, 4 or 5 feet. That's not it. I realize it's up here. I have been running on that teeny-weeny mini gauge. That is, I have been thinking the same thing over and over, even if the scene had changed outside. That is, I cannot seem to think of anything outside of what I normally think of. And the ordinary mind falls in that beautiful trap that if it does that, which it won't, but if it did that, just accidentally, and thought, God, that's frightening. Just on the basis of what it just did, it's relieved. That JB don't have to holler, get up off that thing and relieve the pressure, because the mind, it immediately is relieved, like, and it doesn't analyze it this way, but it's like it could think, wow, I keep thinking the same thing over and over. That seems to be the exception right there. That seemed to have let the air out of that particular beast. And then the mind can just go on. But if you realize internally that you're stuck in that place and you try, you just took it as a personal, attempted method, practice, approach that I am going to start pushing my mind some way, my thoughts. I'm not going to let them stay here. I'm going to push them somewhere. Which also, since it didn't seem to get many people, could I remind you of one from last time that's tied into this? Right on the same thing, wherein I defined meditation as a road with nowhere to go, and useful meditation, same situation, except the meditator knows it. First time, the meditation would almost be what I'm describing now, of someone realizing, well, my mind is stuck right down the sense of reality. Well, that is, I keep saying the same thing over and over. I am going to take it upon myself to, nobody has to know it, but I see that this would make, without any doubt, with very little doubt, could offer great potential if I internally begin to try and push my mind for no particular reason. See, that's when it gets useful, that you know it's not going anywhere. It's not, well, I'm going to try and change the natural automatic thoughts I have about politics because they've always been conservative, let's say. So therefore I'll push them to try and open up my horizons and maybe learn something from the liberal view. Tush, tush, piss, piss, and that's meditating. That won't get you anywhere, but at any rate. And you try to do it. You take it upon yourself. Then we're to what I'm trying to describe to you up here, is feel it inside of you. What are you left with? If you specifically decided, I am going to start trying to pull my thoughts about everything, doesn't matter what, just anytime I can catch it, I'm going to try to pull it out of the rut, out of the same box, out of the same position in the parade, out of this same flatland, out of the same boring position here pressed by the window that I have been. But under all ordinary conditions, what are the possibilities? They that. They are that. They are those that you are surrounded. Surrounded. Now, on one side you have got the snipers, the critics, the kind of thinking that if inside of you now, you try and affect what you're doing, you try and expand what you've been thinking, and one of the easiest things is to just start getting critical, start being a sorehead in areas wherein you were previously not sore, where you were previously not critical. And you can sort of start building that up, not sort of, you can start building that up, and first thing you know, you could have been of a fairly moderate keel emotionally in your views toward life, just an average person, you can keep along that view, and believe it or not, before you know it, with no great expense to yourself, you can actually be a practicing old sorehead. You can just get to the point that you just kind of got, as philosophers say, the red ass about most everything. And many people, we're certainly in the range of the ordinary, many people that do end up being soreheads, in case you don't know it, they're long past the point of having any particular thought about it, of even trying to analyze it themselves. But in the beginning, they found it to be, they found the sense of it to be progress. That they no longer simply accepted ideas in a certain area. They thought, and it felt so good in that certain area that they just sort of let it begin to seep, like letting water in the basement. And it just thought, it felt so good going, well, on religion or on, who cares about that? Or it was just like it felt so good to start with. It's like, well, hey, just let the water in, let it up to my ankles everywhere. And so for you just everything, they start, well, on that, and who cares? And so pretty soon you just got that general attitude. The other one would be of however you ended up, or however you got started, which could have been with drugs, or it could have been with disappointment with religion, but going to the other side, that I was calling become a flake, rather than be that overtly critical of life. It's like you give up on life intellectually. That is, you give up on the standard ideas, and you just try and think. I assume you know what I'm referring to when I say otherworldly. I could go into this in great detail, but it's just the kinds of people that seem as though that their feet are almost not on the ground, that they're talking to dead people, that they're visiting in flying saucers, and kind of flutter their eyes and like, well, God will take care of us when we all die. It's like they just want to give up. Forget the behavior now. Forget what they may say that they're giving up on man's sinful, carnal, unthinking, unfeeling behavior. It's internally we're talking about. In their thoughts, it's like, well, I'm just not going to fool with it. And the first time they ever come up with that, however they stumbled into it, to try and explain theirs a little bit, in the same way, the first time they hear some strange idea, some strange metaphysical, spiritual, some little kind of nutty idea, and they hear it, and at first it strikes them as kind of weird, maybe, but they maybe repeat it, or they ask the person to repeat it, and they chew it and go, no, no, and it kind of tingles. It's like the first time that this guy, the sorehead on the other side of the ditch here, on the other ditch, like the guy who first looked at one idea, something he'd been thinking about, and went, and it kind of, tingled and felt good because he'd never done that. On the other side, the ditch on the other side of the road, using my spatial example, and my thumb again. Then the person on the other side, the would-be flake, it's like the first time they'll just, let's say the first time they heard some weird idea about flying saucers, or you can talk to the dead, or if you go out and close your eyes and stand in the sun, sometimes a message will come through, especially if you're a Sagittarius and it's cold that day. And they think, what? And they go out and they try it, whatever it is. A Ouija board, or just a strange idea. They do something that even they maybe didn't have any faith. Then they just do it. And it's like on the other side of the road, the old sorehead, the potentially old sorehead that goes the first time and goes, hey, that ain't bad. It's like somebody, a would-be flake, can think a flaky thing, take a flaky idea and sort of chew on it or consider it or even repeat it to somebody else. And they think, that's not so bad. The first thing you know, they can pursue it, and whereas in the beginning they were a neophyte, perhaps even a doubting flake, next time you see them, they can be a full-blown flake. They can be now promoting that particular or some form of flakiness. Now consider you individually, that is what you are generally left with. We can call it all sorts of things, but that covers it one way or the other, from my descriptions of calling it criminality, criminal thinking on one side, and insane thinking. It is, you've only got that kind of three describable choices in the brain itself. And there are physiological reasons for that, which I won't go into. Because last time I did the Neurological Society of America, sent out a man in a cab and asked me, well, I would tell you more, but right now I'm laboring under an injunction. So I can't speak about it right now until the matter is resolved. But the way it operates, the operational reality of it, besides the physiological side, is if you are internally yourself, you're faced with a fact that seems to be of three possibilities. Either stay right where you are, more or less think what other people think. No matter how we describe it, it is just right now, if we've, just for instance, we'll use us, but people in other parts of the world, that us right here in Norway, here it is 1969, whatever is reality, the Norwegian reality of the late 60s, here it is, that is reality. And you know it is. It is your mother's reality. We'll assume that your parents and all your, that you grew up in a middle class neighborhood here in Oslo. That's not in Norway, is it? You don't even know where you're from? I always like to test people. The little fellow in the back said, Fargo. No. It's cold, but the wrong country. It is the reality of wherever you are. That is the common reality. There's nothing wrong with it if you're part of the collective, which is what most people end up. The great cry is, I want to be free and I want to be an individual, if you recall, intellectually speaking. The ordinary individual is simply, intellectually speaking, the collective scrawled small. That's all they are. Any good, sane, decent, law-abiding, just plain ordinary Norwegian, an individual. Well, like we all know Olaf here. Well, sit down. But we all know Olaf. I mean, he's sane. He's as decent as any of us. But if he were an ordinary Olaf, if he was just ordinary, you cannot call him an individual, not once you see it. No offense to him. And he, if he begins to see it, could no longer call what he has been up to this point an individual, because if he is a sane, decent, 1960s Norwegian, all he is the collective of Norwegianness writ small. That's him. That's how you know he's sane. That's how anybody is sane, either here or in Argentina. Right now, I mean here, 1983. That you are, if you're a sane Argentine, individually, to call you an individual intellectually is misnamed, because you're not an individual if you're sane. What you are intellectually, if you're sane ordinarily, that is right there in the middle, then you're not an individual. All you are is your local collective writ small. That's how we know you're sane. That's how the majority knows that you are a decent Italian. That all the Italians, the sane Italians, the middle of the road, that which makes Italy what it is right now, 1974, they can look at you individually. They look at you, Pasquale, and they know you're sane. You're a sane Italian on one basis. You are them collectively. You are them writ small. You understand? From a real, more hard-nosed and real view, you're a nobody. That's how you are sane. That's how you're identifiable as being sane. But inside, what gets people intellectually, a few here and there, is they realize that. That is the sense that strikes all, even the sane ones, of being confined, and they normally just end up doing a few little weird things, like once a year get drunk or smoke a little pot, or when their wife's not around, look at a woman and go, woo, 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 you know. Some little sense like, I wish I was freer to do stuff. They don't know what it is, but everyone knows in the great genetic network, in the sane part, everyone knows that they can't really move. The more sane you are, the more civilized you are, the less you even have a sense of freedom. Of course, they can explain that themselves. Life makes them explain that that is part of the purpose of etiquette. Sane, civil behavior is that there are rules of expectation so that we know what people's going to do. That the more civilized you are, in a sense, the less freedom you have. You understand? That the dean of Harvard Law School there he is, making whatever he makes, $200,000 a year, all sorts of perks, and nice clothes, and he's respected, and on all sorts of boards, and he has less freedom in a sense than a minimum wage bricklayer than in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, or Mississippi. The guy guy living in a trailer park. The more civilized you are, in a sense, the less even sense of freedom you have. It's not true, but that's the sense of it. An individual, an ordinary individual who's sane, where this sense of captivity, this desire for some sort of freedom that they cannot quite specify, it comes from the fact that I am not an individual. Everyone knows they're not. The sane people do. People who holler, I am an individual, if they are actually, I think as you people say on earth, serious about it, and really claim to be an individual, then you don't have to look where they are in the parade. They're in a ditch. They're on one side or the other. Because there is no sense of, there is no reality of being an individual. If you are sane, you know you're not an individual. Because the only way you stay sane, the only way that you stay part of the sane middle class is don't be an individual. Not that ordinary people have a chance or a choice, but you cannot be an individual. The way that you know, the way that you're identified, the way that you feel part of the herd, is that the rest of the herd looks at you and they don't take any particular notice. Or if you're running, say that you're part of the Italian Harvard crowd, and there you are in the moose herd, is that constantly or sometimes all the other mooses don't turn around and look at you and go, where'd that pig come from? They just glance around and you're just part of them. If you're an individual, a sane individual, an educated, sophisticated, acceptable, decent, law-abiding individual, it proves one thing. You're nothing at all resembling an individual, because what you are is your collective writ small. That's why you apparently are sane. But back to you individually. Internally, your brain feels that. Or if you get better, you feel that in your brain. Or those of you that really get good, your brain feels that in you. But where are you going to turn? You've got, if you get this far, you can always keep up the facade of sanity. Well, of course, all you got to do is take a shower and periodically and smile and nod. And nod to the head moose. Nod to the rest of the herd. Anytime they look at you, you don't even have to listen to what they're saying. You hear them, braying. If you're in a donkey herd, and they're going. And if it's suddenly, for some reason, it seems to be your turn, that some of them have to look at you like, well, what do you think? Go, hoo-hoo. Hey. Right on, brother mooses. Right on, brother donkeys. And so you can always keep that up. But then internally, where are you going to look? All you can do, under ordinary conditions, is end up trying to join up with, like the rebels, up there in the hills on one side or the other, or down the ditches for that one, whichever one you like. End up taking shots down at where you were. Because that's still there. You're taking shots at you, but you're taking shots at middle class. You're taking shots at what seems to be everyone else's concept of reality. And you had to be part of it enough to get this far. And so you realize, well, I see what they're doing. I got some understanding. I got no complaint. That's where all my friends are. That's where my family. They live there. I got no complaint. I don't want to destroy it. I just want to get the hell out of there. But what are you going to do? Internally, you'll either end up, apparently, the only choice is to go over there in this ditch or up in the mountains here with these rebels and become critics of yourself, of your own people, of sanity, which you got to know is a waste of time. That reality is not the only reality, but attacking it, what good the hell is that going to do? That's like the old thing of, if you could forcibly make somebody more conscious. Boy, will you have done them a favor. Hey, trust me, if you could do that, oh boy, they'd follow you the rest of their life. You know, they couldn't thank you enough. Ha ha. So you understand there is nothing to be gained internally with you, much less anybody else. You're past trying to help anybody else, because to be a real good, potentially mystic, you got interested in helping one person in life. You got one charity work in life. You got one charity case. Because you know you can't do anybody else. So you're not attacking their reality. You're inside with you now, but it seems like, well, if I'm going to break out of me thinking the same way, if I'm going to try and make this train move and get any closer to Istanbul and get myself finally out of the fog and the dreariness of the Adriatic area, I have got to do something. And so it seems like, all right, here's one choice. I become a critic of this, and you realize that's a waste of time. I mean, it's just irrelevant. to stand there the rest of your life and pick out the ironies of what's going on down there in the middle of the road. How impressive. We can skip all the sarcasm. You understand it's a waste of time. So then you can think, well, what's the other possibility? And it's right here in your own mind. It's like, all right, I can go the other way. The other way is, I won't criticize that reality, but it's like I got to in some way drift away. Or maybe I'll float away. And it seems like it might be closer to actual altered states of consciousness or an awakening. I know it seems that way, but it's like I would just drift away from that. Neither one will accomplish it. It is obvious then, you have got to look somewhere beyond both apparent alternatives. That's why it can't be described, because an ordinary mind could end up knocking on a monastery door, knocking on an alternative reality, and saying, I sincerely would like to come in. Just tell me what to do. And you keep listening. And if you're ordinary and you can't get past that point, then if you're not to believe, well, I've wasted my time, then you have to imagine that it's like, what? You know, you're knocked on the door, you know, I sincerely, and you go, what? Now, if you really end up thinking, well, I hear nothing, which for a long time is true, but if you think, I hear nothing, and you can't bear it, you can't face it, here we go. Pick out whatever time period you like. You listen, you listen. And it's like, I heard something. Go to which door? Run to my left? Go. Round this way? Isn't it nice to end on a real solid allegory? You got to go somewhere, but you can't go either of those places. You have got to go beyond anywhere that is either critical or otherworldly. But if the mind is just, if it's left there with that kind of described choices, that kind of describable situation, it'll never move. Either that or it'll have to imagine. Go where? Go where? Well, that was all. Cut the tape. I'm sick of talking about it.